So I'm in Govan, and I'm currently walking down Brimlone Road, and just noticing the building in here. So if we just have a wee look at that. What does that look like to you? Barred windows, small, looks like a prison, doesn't it? I'm sure it's not a prison, but what it actually is the old Govan police station, and it's famous for at least a couple of things. So in 1941, Rudolf Hess, who was the Deputy Führer of Germany, did this rogue mission to try and negotiate peace with Churchill, and he flew over to Scotland. He had to parachute out of his plane. He was picked up by the police, of course, and he was held overnight in one of those cells. It's the only cell that's still in its original state. The others are other places in the wing are used for small workshops and business units. So Rudolf Hess was there for at least a night. And the other thing the building is kind of famous for is the Taggart series. Taggart, the Glasgow cop. So some of the Taggart series in the 90s was filmed, not inside the prison, not inside the cell block, but in the other part of the building. And you can just imagine at one point a police was running up the staircase shouting, "There's been a murder!" So I'm nearly down at Govan Cross now, and down here, just about to see it, there's a statue, a fairly recent one that was set, and it's in memory of Mary Barbour. So Mary Barbour is famous for how she organised and led the women in Govan in 1915 in the rent strikes. Of course, there was a lot of men still working in the shipyards during the First World War, but an awful lot of other men were off fighting, and landlords were putting the rent up. Mary Barbour said, "Well, we're not having that," and she started to organise. I mean, she's obviously a very good organiser, and later on, after 1920, I think it was, she became one of the first women elected as councillors to Glasgow City Council, and then she was a baillie and a magistrate. So here she is, finger pointing, the army behind her, and taking on the factors. The factors would put pressure on folk in the closes and the flats to pay the rent, and she would just at one occasion she got the guys from the shipyard to go to the factor's office with her and demand the money back, and the guy was obviously got quite a fright when he saw who he was up against, and handed back all the money. Pretty impressive, eh? There's a song, I won't sing it, but there is a song, Mrs. Barbers Army. So there's my favourite cafe, Rhubarb and Honey. I'm usually in there for lunch on a Wednesday. Entrance to the Govan Stones, and this is the entrance to the churchyard around the old Govan Parish Church. Now, Govan, if you know anything about Govan, you might think Govan shipbuilding is probably the thing that it's most famous for, but actually Govan used to be the capital of the kingdom of Strathclyde. The old capital of Strathclyde was down in Dumbarton, but it got raided by the Vikings, I think round about 860 or 870, and presumably it was a successful raid because the capital transferred to here. And there's been an abbey in this spot for quite a long time, and there'd also been a meeting point called Doomster Hill. So what you're looking at there is the site of the Christian settlement, and then over a wee burn to Doomster Hill, and at the back of it all is the River Clyde. Now, Doomster Hill was a moot point, so it was where the king or local matters would be decided. It's all gone now. I think it was built over, first of all, by Harland Wolff shipyards, which are over to the right, were over to the right and no longer exist in Govan. And now there's houses on it. But this part of that old site, it's still here because, of course, it's a Church of Scotland cemetery. It's been preserved. And here we are, just going into the cemetery proper. Church is ahead of us. It's quite big. It's about the only open space. Well, there's parks in Govan, and actually there's lovely walks along the river, but this is maybe about the only unbuilt on space. I don't know if you can see it, but over against the wall there's excavations going on. Glasgow University has had an excavation programme here for some decades. So we're going to get into the church, because in the church is where the Govan Stones are displayed. So there's some beautiful early Christian carved stones. There's a sarcophagus that's pretty early as well, but in particular there are the hogback stones, and that's where the Viking influence comes in. Whenever you get hogback stones, you know there's been a Viking influence in and around the area. So let's go in. Just going to go into the church and have a look round, see what we can find. Oh, there's quite a few folk. There were quite a few folk in there earlier. So, and that's some of the guys that can tell us more about what's happening on all the stones. So I've just walked past one that's caught my eye. Look, so yeah, look. I mean, there's 4 snakes sort of writhing out from the centre at the top of this stone slab, and you can see sort of the head. There's the head of the snake, and then there's another one that's a bit clearer in a different position. I mean, these stones are from the 9th century, so 800s. If that reminds me of anything, it reminds me of some of the sigils from Game of Thrones, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones. So this stone is called the Sunstone, and it dates back to the 800s. It's quite something, isn't it? So I'm going to head off down to the hogbacks, and we're just passing some more early Christian upright stones. These ones against the wall, they were stones that lay flat on the ground over someone's burial site. Anyway, let's head further into the church. Main church is to the right as you look down here, and look, there are the 5 hogback stones. Again, 800s or thereabouts. But from the little bit of reading that I have done, it seems that when you do get these hogback stones, they're nearly always associated with Viking influence. And of course, by the 800s, the Vikings had invaded the western parts of Scotland. They'd been right up the River Clyde, obviously, down at Dumbarton. And these are... what they remind me of are upturned boats, but yeah, the little bits of reading that I did actually say that they're more meant to be like the roofs of Viking halls, Viking feasting halls. We'd have a roof shape, something like that, but you can see there's a lot of carving in them, and they're huge. I mean, they must weigh an absolute ton. And some of them were outside. They were out in the graveyard, and at a certain point, very sensibly, they were brought in, and they were preserved. Apparently, at the time, some of the congregation here were not in favour of it, because after all, they're pagan. They shouldn't be in a Church of Scotland. What would John Knox say? So, just going to make my way away from the hogbacks and into the main part of the church. So it is a lovely, lovely building. I mean, that high vaulted ceiling like that, and the stained glass windows, really lovely. If you really can look, I can't show it very well with the camera, but they're really, really beautifully done. So we're heading up to the far end of the church is an extension that was built on by one of the ministers, and what you see in front of you is a stone sarcophagus. They reckon that it was used to hold the relics of Saint Constantine. Saint Constantine was, again, according to the story, was one of the monks with Saint Columba over in Iona, and Columba told him to come here and set up a Christian settlement, and he did it in Govan on this spot, not exactly the spot with the churches, but a little bit out in the courtyard. So look at the knotwork. One side of it, there's a man hunting on a horse. He's also, I noticed, wearing a sword. There's more knot work round here. I think if we move round a bit, and maybe get a clearer view of this side of sarcophagus, and it's they think those are 2 hunting dogs. So maybe even reflections of them in water if they're down at the river, who knows. And then at the far end, that's two deer. So I've come back out again. I'm back in the churchyard. Really enjoyed that. I mean, some of the guys in there, they're such good storytellers. They really kind of enthusiastic about the place that they're showing you around, and they you get enthused yourself. So just walking back out, there's a stone cross that you could maybe just see at the moment. That's again dedicated to St. Constantine. It might be that St. Constantine went on to Iona with St. Columba, and Columba then sent him off to start a Christian settlement here. And it could be that that's the Constantine we're talking about. It also could be, another possibility is that Constantine had served as a king of Strathclyde in the 600s, so 200 years back from where those stones came from, and then he was venerated because he had established an early monastery in Govan. I'm going to finish. Hope you've enjoyed hearing about Govan as the capital of the Kingdom of Strathclyde, with all its Viking influence, because the Vikings were just down the river in Dumbarton at one point. I've really enjoyed it. Hope you have too. I'm off to the cafe for a cup of coffee. Bye.
In the tenements of Glasgow in the year 1915, it was one long bloody struggle to keep ourselves alive. We were counting out the coppers just to buy our scraps of food, when the landlords put the rent up just because they could. Oh, the factories were humming, there was overtime galore, but the wages they were driven down to subsidise the war. Out came Mary Barbour, from her wee bit single hen. She said, I'll organise the lassies if I can't rouse them in, 'cause I'm fae Govan, and you're fae Partick. This year's fae Bradshaw, we're in John's fae Kinnan Park. There's some of us prods, there's some of us Catholics. We're Mrs. Barbers Army, and we're here to do the work. Mary Barbour made a poster saying we'll no pay higher rent, then chopped on every door of every Govan tenement. Put this in the windy when you hear me bang the drum. We'll come out and chase the factor all the way to Kingdom Come. When the poor wee soul came round, he was battered black and blue by a regiment and pennies that knew just what to do. Mrs. Barbour organised the gathering of the clans, and they burst out of the steamy, armed with pots and frying pans, 'cause I'm fae Govan, you sing along, and you're fae Partick. This year's fae Bradshaw, we're in John's fae Kinnan Park. There's some of us prods, there's some of us Catholics, but we're Mrs. Barbour's Army, and we're here to do the work. Miss Barbour's Army spread through Glasgow like the plague. The maesters got the message, and the message was nae big. While our men will fight the Kaiser, we'll stay home and fight the war against the greedy bastards who keep grinding down the poor. So if you want to stop conscription, stand and fight the profiteers. Bring the hail big bloody Sanskrit crashing down our inner ears. We'll no starve, said Mrs. Barbour, while the men we call her in are marching after see their hearts blood last like water down the drain. 'Cause I'm fae Govan, and you're fae Partick. This year's fae Bradshaw, we're in Don's fae Kinnan Park. There's some of us prods, there's some of us Catholics, but we're Mrs. Barbour's Army, and we're here to do the work. Well, it didn't take the government that long to realise, if you crack down on the leaders, then the rest will compromise. They arrested Mary Barbour and they clapped her in the jail, but they made an awfully big mistake, they let her out on bail. She caught the men out of the factories on the Clyde and on the cart. They marched up to the court who's saying we'll tear the place apart. Mrs. Barbour's Army brought the maesters to their knees. We are regiment and pennies, backed by one in dungarees. 'Cause I'm fae Govan, and you're fae Partick. Missionaries we Bradshaw, we're in Johns, we Kennan Park. There's some of us prods, there's some of us Catholics, but we're Mrs. Barber's Army and we're here to do the work. Mrs. Barber's Army and we're here to do the work. Yay!
Bravo! Just one on.